What's up, everybody? It's Chad. We're back again a day after the last episode for another episode of Ask Chad Grassy Logic. Today, I'm here with my good and old friend, Amy Rasinski. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, anytime, and it's been a long time coming. I've been wanting to have my old advocacy friends, my OG friends, from the medical days to start coming on the show and everything so I can stop telling everybody about the history and y'all can help me out.
That's why we're here.
Exactly, 100%. So thank you so much for joining me. Emmy's up in Albuquerque area and up north. She's been around for a long time, like I said, but I won't speak for her. I'll just let her do it herself. So if you could go ahead and give us a cool introduction of yourself.
Sure. I'm Amy Rasinski. I started in the industry back in 2016, and it goes way back to somebody Chad knows, long history. My nephew, Zach. Zach Hayes was my nephew. He had cystic fibrosis and passed away in 2016. And he was tied to the Organtica crew, and he was OG founding member. He was one of the board members. He was the medical patient that you needed to get the board going to get a license back then. So.
And that's something funny I didn't know was that he was a part of the board. I knew he was a part of the company working and everything, but I never knew he was a part of the board. That's actually really cool. He was a very motivating kid. I loved being around him. Of course, his love for fishing also matched my love for fishing. And he was just a neat kid, and he was a fighter. If you guys don't know what cystic fibrosis is or really does, is it, just kind of made him cough a lot. He had a lot of phlegm, right? Like a lot of buildup in his lungs.
It's a genetic disease that's created, obviously before he was born, he had a lot of complications, and it builds up mucus in your lungs and you can't quite expel all of it. And it also causes a lot of other complications. It builds and makes all of the fluids in your body more sticky and more viscous. So it's harder to expel those hard things and those bad things, mostly in the intestines and that kind of stuff. So, and he passed away in 2016, and the cannabis community all came together and helped pull everybody in the family through that. He was a big part of it. And then, the clones that Organica made and just passed out through the state was pretty cool.
And to be honest, to give you guys some background on that. So yeah, Zach was very heavily involved with the industry. I remember being at one of the events after he passed away. I drove from down here to up there for that and everything. That's how important that kid was to the industry and to all of us. And even to this day, I had one of those Zach Hayes clones, and then I crossed it with a green crack male, and now I have Zach's crack. And so I have a bunch of seeds. I'll have to bring some up to you when I go to Albuquerque and let you.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Some. I'd love to grow some of that. Maybe it'll grow a little bit heftier than the Zach Hayes did, because it was like him. It grew real scrawny.
It did. And you know what? I gave him a little more height with this one. I figured that's what would happen with the green crack. And so, it makes it a little taller.
He'd be happy to hear that. That's for sure.
He was. I always keep him in mind whenever I see those seeds, especially when I've grown it a couple of times and stuff. So. I'll have to give you that. Shout out to Zach. He was a great guy. His passing was unfortunate. Of course, touched all of us in the whole industry. And I really don't want him to ever be forgotten. And I've spoken about him before. But almost like Essie, I kind of feel that plays a very crucial role in the history of the cannabis industry, because I would go over to Tim's house and I'd be hanging out or whatever, and I'd hear Zach just coughing up a lung. Before going to work or something. And then or hearing Tim go, you know what? Like on the days where I feel like I'm being a little bitch, I hear him coughing, getting ready for work, not giving a shit. And I'm over here whining because I'm just tired. This guy's over here coughing up a lung, and he's still going to work.
And at the same time, passing you a dab to say, come on, get your shit together.
Yeah. Come on, bitch, get ready. We're like, whoa.
He gave me my first dab, ever.
Did he?
Yeah, it was a funny story. I'd gone over, me and my mom were hanging out, and he was there. And he's like, Aunt Amy, you ever dabbed? I was like, tell me more. He's like, come here. And he takes me in a room with his buddy, and they fire up the torch. And I'm just standing there watching him, no reaction, because this kid never surprised me. So I'm just standing there watching him. And he's like, okay, so you're going to suck and you're going to hit it here. I was like, okay. And he puts the dab in, and I inhaled it, and I just stood there and blew it out and finished it off and blew it out. And he looks at me, he's like, and I was like, and he looks at his buddy, he's like, did you give her a big enough dab? Give her another one.
Oh, that's great. He was a funny kid. He loved dabbing people out for sure. I mean, I know he dabbed me out a few times. Or he'll join me and like, because there'd be times where he'd bless us with, his presence, just whatever, when I'd be at Tim's, just coming, I'm like, what's up, dude? Come and dab with us and shit. And so
Yeah,
just a cool kid, and, just a fighter, just really motivates you and shows you that, you just don't give up, like why
absolutely.
give up,
Absolutely. And when he was coughing, I just let him cough because I didn't know if it was a dab cough or if he was really actually having problems. Most people you'd be like, dude, you okay? And I'd let him
Yeah.
go and let him go. And then I'd look at him and he's like, don't fuck with me. I'm like, okay, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
That was
And
that.
he was that was Zach for sure. And, he loved his family and everything too. So I'm glad we're getting a chance to remember him and everything, and have this conversation. And I'm sure some people watching remember Zach, and especially from Albuquerque and everything. So in the comments or anything, post your favorite memory. That'd be kind of cool. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, because we
I
all
know
miss
it's
them. We all
nice
miss
when
them.
I go around and meet other people out in the industry that have been out there for a while in areas I don't go to, that A may come up in conversation and I just toss out there that he was my nephew and, showstopper. It's always a great opening for a good conversation and a good friend.
Yeah, 100%. He was a great friend. It's just unfortunate I didn't get enough time with him. But and I think that's for all of us.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I think we got more time, and I think we're being selfish because we got way more time with him than we probably should have. With the case, with the issues that he had, and
Absolutely.
people kept telling me, we're surprised he's living this old, et cetera, et cetera. The people that have this usually don't live that long, and he did bless us for, was it 21 years or 20 years or something like that?
He would have been, I think he was 19, he would have been
19.
20.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, we at least got that with him,
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
I'm blessed to have that time with that amazing kid, and he changed my perspective on some things in life for sure.
Right.
So I hold him in high regard with everyone, and if you guys don't know who he is, I'm sure you can find posts and stuff online about the cool stuff he did and all that. And I know Josh McCurdy posts the picture of him fishing with them sometimes, and that's always a cool thing.
That's always every one of everybody's favorites too. So
Yeah,
that,
yeah, fishing.
well, that one and the one with him and Tim and the big old bud
I remember that
when
one.
he was harvesting. Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
good one
And
too.
for those of you who are kind of just joining the show, your new listeners and maybe new to New Mexico cannabis industry, Organtica was one of the second waves of cannabis licenses that was selected during the medical cannabis days. And to be honest, to the day they closed, they remained a medical cannabis dispensary. They really catered to the patients. It was pretty much patients growing for patients, and one of the very few in the state that I would comfortably say that actually did that.
And
And
you could put in special orders and stuff like that as medical
yeah,
patients, and they would fulfill them, whether it was tinctures or capsules or dosing on your edibles. They made special orders for patients, and that was pretty cool.
yeah, and that's actually where I got a lot of my experience. Working in facilities and stuff. I would go and volunteer. If I was in Albuquerque, I'd hit up Tim, be like, "Hey, what are you up to, man?" He was like, "Oh, at the facility." I was like, "I'll come down." I'd go and help him trim. I'd help him package or do capsules or something like that. Just something to give back to the patients. Like if I had some free time, maybe some 3 or 4 hours, I'm gonna go go to Organica, help the patients out. And that's one thing that is like missing these days from our medical side is the compassionate part.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
certainly.
still people doing some good stuff, but I still feel it's lacking that compassionate, and
Yeah,
it's in the name.
absolutely.
And people like Zach need to remind us to get back to
That's
that,
right.
and that mindset. And even thinking now, I was like, damn, I used to do way more for the patients back in the day than I even do now, and that's on
Well,
me.
there used to be a lot more patients back then too.
That's fair. We,
That's kind of the sad part is there aren't as many fighting for the program, and people are missing out because, with the taxes increasing and all that stuff, it's just going to trickle down to the consumer. And if you're not a patient, you're a consumer. So
And it already has. I mean, only one dispensary I know of, and that's Cookies in Sunland Park, is eating the taxes or eating that 1%. But the rest, they're charging the extra percent. And some of them are upset. Like, we had out the door prices, then all of a sudden this tax change, and now everything's messed up. And then we're getting patients coming in who, are scraping pennies essentially to get their medicine. And they're like, well, now I got to figure out how to, get this extra 20 cents or something. And luckily, most of them are nice, and they have like, they'll take it from the tip jar or something like that,
Yeah.
which is nice. Don't get me wrong. You don't have to, but,
But
still.
then there's also some of them that, can't afford any of that and, they're struggling as it is. So
Yeah. Cause I
like
remember actually, I think Organica had a patient fund,
I
didn't they,
was
back in
gonna
the day?
say, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. Circling back to Organica, they had the patient fund and,
Hmm.
that's how you and I met was pretty
Hmm.
much down there at the plant because after Zach had passed away, I started volunteering and I was working at the store and at the door and then I moved into bud tending and then moved into their little pharmacy area that was dispensing to the bud tenders. And from there, it was time Tim needed a full-time person, so I moved into packaging right under him. And he pretty much taught me everything I know in the packaging realm down there and BioTrack.
Goddamn BioTrack. I hate
Imagine,
it.
imagine, as he would call it, the bio bitch, but
The bio. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, we'd have a good time there. I remember they used to have a basketball hoop in the back, where the grow is and everything. I remember messing around and playing some basketball over there
they
because we'll
used
have little
to
smoke breaks.
do the skateboards in the run in the back, and then they do the little remote control cars.
Yeah, they were
But
fools, man. It
but
was fun.
they would also do like potluck lunches and
Hmm.
barbecue for the staff and stuff like that. They really it was a family, and I'm not
Hmm.
gonna lie, that's part of where cannabis started saving my life because when Zach passed away, I was on a lot of pharmaceutical drugs. I was taking antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. And then in turn, I was taking stomach medication to help those things digest, and then sleeping pills. I was on it at least 8 medications at any given time. And when Zach passed away and I started learning more about cannabis and the endocannabinoid system that they don't teach you about in school, and how it regulates your body and how you can control a lot of those things just by your cannabis intake. And I quit all of those medications cold turkey
Wow. And
and took cannabis and became a
yeah,
cannabis patient. And to this day, I'm still really hard on not taking pharmaceuticals. I have to get a really bad migraine before I'll even take something over the counter. And I used to be on medication for migraines. So all of those
wow.
things you can control some of them with your cannabis intake and or your not cannabis intake, depending on what they are.
Yeah, 100%. And you know what? That's a great segue to get into, um, your experience with cannabis and everything. Is that when it started? Was after Zach passed away, or did you use cannabis before? I mean, I know the
I had
dab, but
I had used cannabis before, but it was more of a recreational thing. And had I known more about it when I was in high school and the benefits of anti-anxiety use with it, my whole life would have been different. So when I started learning about those things, I was like, I really don't need those pharmaceuticals. I just need to
yeah,
learn what my body needs and how to take it and how to react to it.
yeah, and that's a success story, and we're unfortunately seeing, Texas right now, with that SB5 bill, to ban the hemp stuff, and a lot of the stuff that they're saying is like opposite of what your personal experiences, and a lot of it doesn't come with any kind of proof or any of that. It's just I had a constituent that said he tried the marijuanas, and next thing he know, he ate a whole box of cereal, and then he pooped himself or something stupid. And then you hear these stories and you're like, no, these are the real stories, not just the reefer madness ones, or the offshoot story where this guy just had a really bad day and a bad experience. um you know we have more of the success than you do not, with cannabis.
Well, and with that being said, don't get me wrong, I had plenty of drinking in my days, but I also know how bad it made me feel, the
Mhm.
aftermath, and how it promoted my anxiety and my depression and my migraines and all of those things. And, it was not too long after Zach passed away that my husband passed away as well. And once
Oh,
again, Organica was there to help hold me as a family because there was a lot of things going on that was unbearable, but they were there as that family to help me. And I firmly believe that alcohol was part of what killed him.
yeah. I'm a firm
And
believer that it's killed a few of my family members and people I've cared about because even myself, I don't drink anymore. It's
yeah, I
probably
don't
been
either.
close to about 3 years since I've had it like a drink.
It's been close
For
to
me.
6. So, and if I
Yeah.
have a drink, I have to be with some really good friends and it's got to be a big occasion. And I have a 3-drink rule, 3 drinks and I'm out. And it doesn't make a difference if I have one, if you have two, makes no difference because after 3 drinks, people get stupid and I ain't got time for that.
Yeah, exactly. I used to like have at least one or whatever, but I've been having some like older people issues. I'm like, you know what? I think drinking is just not going
Yeah,
to make any of this like better. And even
that's
now, when I go to
exactly
the
right.
doctor, that's one of the main questions. Like, oh, what's your drinking intake? I'm like 0. They're like, oh,
0.
thank God. I'm like, right.
Me too. Well, and interesting enough, I just had some health issues this year. I dealt with an appendicitis and an appendectomy, and then, in the last 3 weeks, a hernia repair surgery as well. And every time I went in, it was, do you drink? Nope. Do you smoke? I'm a cannabis user, and that's it. Okay, well, take these when you go home, and I'd take the ibuprofen. I'd take as minimal as I could of anything else, and I was just like, and they respected that, and they didn't have, it was a lot different than them looking at me like I was a drug addict.
Yeah. And you know what? To be honest, the VA for the most part has been pretty hands off with it when I explain to them what's going on with me and stuff like that. Even the other day when I went to the dentist, like, do you smoke? I was like, no. I was like, I'm a medical cannabis user. Oh, okay. And they just
Yep,
moved on from there.
that's kind of the same response I get, which is great for me. And they
Yeah.
just, it's in my chart, but they also know that I don't take a lot of the pills that they give me. And when I was in the hospital for 5 days after the second dose of the morphine, I was like, nope, nope, I've got some ibuprofen. Can I pop that?
Right? It's like, no, thank you. Even I ripped my calf like a month ago, and so I was hobbling around, and I had to take some ibuprofen and some Tylenol, and I was even reluctant for that. My girlfriend's
Yeah,
like, you
me
need to take
too.
it, the swelling. And I was like, okay.
I know. I'm like, can't I just go take a dab and a couple bong rips? I'll be okay, I swear.
Right. Just put some balm on it and leave me alone.
Well, no lie, that's what got me through almost a whole week of fighting my appendectomy or my appendicitis because I knew something was going on, but I had a week of stuff I had to get done, and I was like, we'll see. I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm just self-diagnosing myself after all, and then after I went home one day because I forgot my ibuprofen, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go grab my ibuprofen, and I came home and passed out. I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going back to work, and I should probably go to the hospital.
Yeah, there's times where it's like when I ripped my calf, I knew right away. I was like, I gotta go to the hospital. So like because in gents watching this, if you're close to 40, it's more common for us to rip our calves. And if that does happen, it's not a joking matter. Go to the doctor because if it's ripped
ASAP.
in a certain way, they will have to operate. Luckily, they didn't have to operate on mine. My leg was just really swollen. So there's a tip for you guys and stretch. Don't be a dumbass like me. Stretch. So,
Listen to your
um,
body because even though you feel like you're 25 still, you're not.
no, my mind may be like, yeah, we got this. My body's like, the fuck
Exactly.
you do.
Exactly. I know. I've been wanting to get back on my roller skates, and I'm like, bitch, you don't have a helmet yet. What are you thinking?
I know. Next time I see you, you're gonna have like a Harry Potter scar or something. He's like, oh, Amy, you did it, didn't you?
I'll be walking around with a helmet all the time. It's my fashion
Oh,
statement.
right? in, totally in.
What do you mean? I don't pull this off? Come on.
It matches. Oh,
Exactly.
that's great. So, I guess let's get more into, like your background in cannabis and stuff. So, what are you doing now? What else are you going? What do you have now since we went, beyond medical cannabis and now it's adult use? What have you been up to?
Well, right before medical went rec, I joined GH and they
Hmm.
had only been open, I want to say 5 months. And I joined them and I was working in the kitchen and working in the bio track. So, amen
Hmm.
for Tim. And nobody else, they had just had a staff change and they were having some struggles with a couple areas. So, happened to know a couple things. So, I got a good job and that's kind of where I've been since. And running production, which is what Tim taught me so well. And then that led into compliance because I'm kind of, I'm guilty. I'm truthful to a fault. And if we're gonna have a compliance issue, I want to know whether or not my job's on the line. And if we've got a compliance issue, my job's on the line.
Yeah.
So it's kind of taken me into becoming the director of compliance for the company and writing SOPs and making sure things are on point, making sure people follow the rules and that we're being good to them as well because, it kind of goes both ways. You can't expect your employees to have a bunch of rules set before them, but not, have some sort of PTO or something that pays off for them in the end. And I work in the lab part. I don't work very much with the stores anymore. I was working with the stores, making sure they were on point, but they've got plenty of people that do that there now. So I just work in the lab part. And, I don't do a lot of hands-on in the grow, but I've learned some things about in the grow. And I also work some of the grow biotrack system. It's it's been a really good venture. I've learned a lot of areas in the manufacture process that organic didn't necessarily do.
Yeah.
We have ETS hydrocarbon machine. We do CO2 extraction as well as full on distal after all of either one of those. So it's a pretty big busy practice. And then all that trickles down into carts and filling and all-in-ones as well as edibles and in the kitchen and converting all of those products. So
Dang. So they got you busy. So this is still at GH, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And for those who you may not know, who is GH? What does it stand for?
Generation Health. Well, what the stores were called Generation Health, but GH itself is GH LLC. I don't know if they actually have a meaning for the G and the H. We've
I've
gone
always known him
through.
as GH as well too. So
Yeah. And when I began and I addressed one as another, I was kind of, no, that's not it. So I don't know. We recently went through some changes in May and things have been working out really well. Production's picked up. We do outside processing as well
Mhm.
as white labeling for a lot of companies around the state. We're in probably 100 to 150 different dispensaries statewide as well. We
Nice.
do
Congrats.
yeah, we do wholesale as well as white labeling for small dispensaries if that's what they're looking for. It's just a matter of getting with us and figuring out what the process is and what you want us to do.
Yeah. One of my buddies, David, he actually, I went with him a couple months back. You weren't there. I think I'd messaged you and you were off that day or something. But he went to drop and like, yeah, we'll just do a split and just took it off his hands. And that was that. I was like, well, that was fucking easy. It's like, what do you want to do a split? How do you want to do this? Like, we'll just do a split. He was like, okay, that was it. Took it off.
Yeah, that's what we do too. I mean, we do splits, but if you need packaging, then that costs a little bit just because, all the tariffs and all that and hardware and it just trickles down. And ever since COVID, things have just been wacky, that's for sure.
Yeah, charge a penny more, and by the end, it ends up a quarter. So yeah,
Yeah.
it is what it is. So I get it. We do the packaging stuff too down here as well. Luckily we do our own packaging, so that saves us some money. But when
Yeah.
other people want to get packaging, it's like we have to charge what we have to charge. If you want the
And that's
packaging, man, it
and
costs.
you get it. I mean, we
Yeah,
do the same thing. Our packaging is what we package, and a lot of our a lot of our stuff is pre-branded. So if we're
Mhm.
going to do white labeling, we have to buy other stuff for those
Mhm.
white labeling. So it's just,
Create the design, and it costs money from the very beginning. Just making the design costs money.
yeah, I
So
know.
yeah,
Well, and if you've got a logo, we'll use your logo. Makes no
yeah.
difference to us. But a lot of times they're like, oh, you'll make a design? Well, this and that. And then I'm like, okay, TikTok people, how long you want this?
Want like a
Did
Mary
you?
Poppins umbrella, and
I
then
was going
you
to
should
have this back to you in 30 days, and now you're looking at 60.
right,
You can't figure it out.
right.
I know, we're
um,
all stoners. We're all stoners. So.
right. So what's the future plans for you? Do you plan on staying at GH forever? Do you have any, maybe personal brand, plans in the future or anything?
Nothing particular, you know me. I'm kind of neutral across the board. I don't ever, I try really hard not to necessarily burn bridges.
Mhm.
There's sometimes that you just got to walk away and things don't circle in your life at that moment, but that doesn't mean that there's got to be a lot of animosity behind it.
Yeah.
Um, I am a member of Farm Flourish. I work with Erica on some things and, help her out when she needs a couple things here or there. People have asked me if I write SOPs. I'm also willing to, I help our people that, our new vendors that come in, I help them with BioTrack. It's hard to say. I don't know for sure where I see myself in 5 years. I don't plan on going anywhere right now. I'm pretty happy with my position in the company. They take pretty decent care of me. So
That's
I'm
good.
just I'm hoping the industry gets a little bit better so the rest of us can get a little bit better.
And that was my next question. What's your hopes to see and key changes that you hope happen in the industry, to improve it? I think New Mexico's on the right track. It's just, of course, we need to tweak some things and improve things, of course.
And I think it's just still a matter of time. A lot of things are still coming out in the wash, and there's some new people coming in and some new
Mhm.
games playing, and it's just a matter of holding strong and being true to your brand and knowing what you have. And I think we've got some pretty decent products on the market, and I think we make some pretty good products for other people that sell pretty well. So it's just a matter of keeping it together. I'd like for our company to do a little bit better so we can get more staff and not always feel like we're like some people scrambling at the last minute.
Right. I
Nobody
got to
likes
stay
a
ahead of
late
it.
Friday after you've worked all your hours during the week. So,
Right.
but at the same time, everybody wants their product on a Friday. That's just kind of how the game is.
Yeah, exactly. Or after or before a long weekend or a certain holiday, that's the game. So it always is what it is, especially when we're vamping up for that 420 date. That's like
Yeah.
that thing is crazy when people are getting ready for 420. It's like months of preparation for that
But
one day.
I don't think it's been nearly as crazy the last couple years as it was with medical.
It wasn't, but in Sunland Park, it has been
I bet. Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Because that's the Texas market, like the New
Well,
Mexico
and
market's pretty chill.
710 probably the same way. And I
Yeah.
think it's also because a lot of places in Albuquerque don't necessarily, yeah, they'll throw a special or yeah, they'll throw a deal, but it's hard to bring in a big crowd depending on
Mhm.
what day of the week it is.
Yeah, and the Albuquerque's been Albuquerque's had more of a cannabis community than the South has. And that's why I pretty much started up north. And I was more known at the beginning up north because of that.
Yeah.
The,
Yeah.
the community, the medical cannabis community was in Albuquerque. It is what it is. We were trying to build one down here. It was slowly building. It's still building. And one day we'll figure it out. But I will give Albuquerque that. You guys have had a very strong cannabis community for a very long time, but they're picky. Oh man, they're picky, which is fair.
Well,
But
I'm
woohoo,
not gonna lie, I'm kind of picky too, you get used to it.
yeah,
It's a matter of your profiles and what you're used
hmm
to. And as a medical patient, you kind of have standards and you want to
hmm
make sure you've got your testing and that things are falling right. And if you can give me terpene profiles and tell me more of what it's going to do to my body, then we're going to talk more business. That's for sure.
yeah. And I kind of enjoy that because I'm picky. I'm one of those New Mexicans, but I acknowledge that Albuquerque as a whole is more snobby when it comes to it than most of the state because of the experience that has been up there. I mean, the Green Mile has been the Green Mile since the medical days in
Oh
Albuquerque.
yeah. Oh yeah,
You
for a
know, yeah,
reason.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's been called that since I think around 2016 or so.
Yes,
Is around
exactly.
the time when we started calling it that, and it's not changed.
That's
It just
true.
got greener, if anything. Uh,
Absolutely. I
yeah,
was just gonna say, definitely got greener.
yeah, and it's not because of rain.
No.
But yeah, I appreciate that. I like to ask people that. But one more thing I want to ask, and this has nothing to do with cannabis. This is something new coming to the state. What is your hopes for our new psilocybin medical program coming up?
I'm a big advocate. I was just at a yoga retreat this weekend with I don't know if I'd have to look up his last name, but his first name is Blavi and his
Mhm.
wife's name is Lita. And they're both doctors. And Lita was one of the leading physicians in the psilocybin push.
Oh wow.
Um, I don't know if you're aware of this as well, but I microdosed from 2019 forward because of the events that occurred in my life and some of the
Mhm.
things that were going on. And good old Timmy turned me on to capsules and
Yeah.
microdosing and how it really helped change things in me. And I had a bad experience a couple years back when I was on travel and mushrooms and headaches and that kind of stuff. So I kind of laid off for a while, but I've gotten back into microdosing with the gummies. And I think it's great for the medical. I think it, there's a lot of research that it shows it grows new neurons and it helps make new connections. And I think it's also a really good reset for people that are having really hard times in their life, even if it's just on a small level.
Yeah, and as we progress on, with it, I'm going to kind of do 50-50 cannabis psilocybin stuff on my show, and the advocacy work that I do and stuff. Because I did help push that bill and get it passed and everything, and worked with some of the organizations that were sponsor or that were part of the sponsorship and stuff. So I kind of feel that it's one of those things, but also veterans are going to be benefiting from it heavily, and
Good.
that's one reason why I wanted it to pass. And so I'm glad. And some people argue the way that it was passed, et cetera, et cetera. But we have to do psilocybin different than we did cannabis, just because they're not the same thing, and we have to acknowledge that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once we acknowledge that, which I think most people do, and they've been very good about acknowledging that, yes, this isn't cannabis. We do have to do this a little bit more in a controlled environment than the cannabis thing, because cannabis, for the most part, it's like I wouldn't say a joke, but like you can make jokes about it because like, oh, you smoke too much, you're just gonna take a nap and eat. Yeah, whatever, dude, you're being dumb. But psilocybin is kind of like, oh shit, like it's
Well, and I'm
different.
not gonna lie, I've never fully tripped on mushrooms. I've never
Mhm.
had a full on dose of mushrooms because of my fear about that.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of research as far as mushrooms, acids, psychedelics in general before I went into any sort of trip stage, just because I wanted to make sure I was in the right mindset. I
Mhm.
wanted to make sure that I had a trip sitter because I'd never been in that state before,
Mhm.
and just the right setting. And not all those things line up at the time. And it took a while before I managed to find my venue for that. And mushrooms, I don't have all day.
Yeah, that's true. They last a while.
I can't put that on the calendar. Well, I'm taking these days off because I'm going to go do this. And then, you think you've got it, and then something throws a wrench in your life, and you're like, oh, I can't do that now.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're like in the middle of it. It's like, I can't
Yeah,
adult right
yeah,
now.
exactly. So, yeah, I haven't done the full on dosing of mushrooms, but I still firmly believe in it's triable for everybody at some level. I
Yeah.
think it's just a matter of touching what level is best for you. I'm a big
100%.
fan of the mushroom gummies that I get from a friend.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, allegedly a friend of both of ours, but
Yeah.
who do I
Oh,
know?
got it. Got it. I want to say earlier too that I started calling Tim Jedi Tim, for obvious reasons. So yeah, that's one of his. So call him that, and he'd probably be like, "Chad told you, huh?"
Well,
So
I think it's interesting too, because even him, who's gone through so much in life and experienced with so many venues and has strictly just been cannabis for so long, actually went and had a session with somebody where he had a full mushroom trip and a yoga type setting, and it changed his life.
yeah, yeah, and I could tell, like he's more. I mean, he's always been chill. He's even more chill now.
Always.
More like,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, okay, like almost like he let go of some things that were bothering him.
Well, and
Is what
not
it
only
feels.
that, but he's lost a lot of weight. I don't know if you've
Has
seen him
he?
lately.
You know what? I'll hit him up this weekend while I'm up there. And
Yeah,
go see him,
definitely.
whatever, and hang
Yeah.
out with him because I haven't seen him in a bit. So I don't know if he's gonna watch this, but if he watches it,
He
it's gonna
will
tip him off. But I don't think he's gonna
once
see
he
it.
sees who's on here. He'll be like, "Oh, I'm watching."
Exactly. I think I'll be up there already, so hopefully I'll be like at his house once it drops. So we'll see.
Cool.
But yeah, but anyway, thank you so much. It's such a great conversation, catching up and everything. Getting your side on certain things and learning some new things about you too. Because we've known each other for almost 10 years, but we're going to learn stuff about each other for as long as we know each other. And so it's always cool to learn new things and stuff like that. And, shout out to Zach one more time, such a great kid and, such a great motivation, even to this day.
Absolutely.
So of
Absolutely.
course, so thank you for that, but we're going to move on to the next conversation. But before we do, is there anything you want to add or talk about?
I don't think so.
Cool.
I think we
Awesome.
kind of wrapped that full circle pretty well.
I think so. Well, next we're going to talk about cannabis and shipping cannabis. I think I talked about this on the show a while ago, or maybe it was on my stories, but I did mention that California was working on a bill to allow intrastate cannabis shipping through intrastate means, meaning it won't be UPS, USPS, or FedEx. It would be like a local company that does shipping in the state. They have a bunch. I looked it up that day. However, the federal government's going one level up from that. So recently, a federal representative, he's a representative in the House, and another representative, yes. So it's Jared Huffman from California, he's a Democrat, and Val Hoyle from Oregon, both Democrats. They introduced this bill in the House, and what this bill will do is it will allow states that have legal cannabis to allow their micro producers, not the big ones, their micro producers to ship directly from their production or their farm to the customer. Farm to table kind of situation. But this is only when we figure out this federal legalization fiasco that we have going on here. Once we figure that out, either we deschedule, reschedule, or whatever happens, that's when this is going to take in place. So it'll be like a trigger thing. What's cool about it is it also has in here that if you have to ship it and say, Texas decides to keep it illegal, right? Well, Texas can't stop my shipment. You have to allow it to go through your state. It's not stopping in your state, but you can't stop the shipment. That's something cool about it too. And the fact that they're really thinking about the micros now. And I think one mistake that they realized is when they did this whole alcohol thing, we didn't get micros legal until like the 80s. Like the late 70s, 80s. And then even then, it took a long time for them to kind of start popping up to where they are now. And I think they're like, all right, so we need to really focus on the micro businesses and the mom and pops and to ensure that they have a chance. And this is their solution to that, or one of them. And to be honest, I think it's a great idea. And I don't know how long it's going to be until we can use this, but I feel like it's a positive thing for the industry, because if I'm a small farmer and we legalize it federally, well, now my competition didn't just go from the guy across the state. It's a guy over 7 states over, or maybe the next state over. Like my competition just increased heavily. So one way to combat that is sell it to the consumer online. Why the fuck not? And so you'll be able to use USPS, FedEx, UPS, et cetera, et cetera. You'll be able to use those ones with this bill. I don't see it not passing. I guess there was something similar that was never enacted. I don't know the reason why. The article didn't say, and my research didn't really pull up any reason why. I could just only think of political. But this one right here, I think, goes a little bit further because the other one didn't have the, if the state has a legal, doesn't allow legal cannabis, they would be able to start your parcel. And I don't think that's right. It should be, if it's shipped, it's legal, it's going through your state, tough shit. It's not stopping there. That's not the end thing. So what's your thoughts so far, on this kind of move that, these two representatives did?
Same thing. I think that, first of all, feds need to figure that shit out and deschedule it so we don't have this problem. It should be accessible. If I can go to, Total Wine and buy their THC drinks, why should I not be able to go and purchase from a grower that's in Arizona because I like what they do with their grow.
Yeah.
And I can go and buy alcohol at Total Wine right next to it. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the states that are holding on as far as fighting it have a lot of means in alcohol.
Yeah.
So
and Texas being one of them heavily.
yeah, and that's one of their, they're worried that they're going to lose more money in the alcohol if they legalize cannabis, but they're not understanding that cannabis sales are already outselling alcohol sales. And they just need to get on the boat so they're not losing their ass as it is.
And some of them are getting smarter. I was going to do a cannabis drink story because, I'm huge on the cannabis drinks. And to be honest, everything is pointing to that being one of the main means that we consume cannabis in the future. Coors is looking towards it. I think Bud Light and, Bush, Budweiser or whatever the hell they're called. Anheuser-Busch, there we go. I don't drink anymore, obviously. I think they're all getting into it, and a couple of other ones too, and the subsidiaries and stuff like that. So some of them are getting smart. It's like, look, we're not going to beat this, so we might as well join it. And so some of them are experimenting with, cannabis drinks, different markets, this and that, blah, blah, blah. So some are, but the ones that aren't are the ones that are going to be kicking and screaming on the way out, fighting it as much as possible. Like, I've even had, conversations with people who have smaller, like microbrews, and it's like, oh, you don't drink anymore? It's like, damn it, you're the reason why I'm going out of business. I'm like, I just care about my health, like over your profit. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. So yeah, this could be something, really beneficial for us in the future. Now, again, a lot has to change in order for this to happen. And even here in New Mexico, we have a trigger law that allows interstate commerce, but within that, two things have to happen. One, the government obviously has to change the federal laws. And two, both governors of both states and our statute have to agree to it. So that's something that I feel that needs to change in the future to just being a pure trigger. So, federal legalization happens, I think it shouldn't just be like, oh, we sell to other states. It's like, okay, the state needs to come up with rules and laws now for this interstate commerce thing, or maybe get ahead of it and have a trigger law added to the trigger law itself.
Well, it'd be nice for, states to get inner transportation of cannabis in the state without a problem. We shouldn't have to worry about going through checkpoints between here and there to transport our product to people in Sunland or people, down in Las Cruces, and worry about losing our transport because we had to get stopped at the checkpoint.
Yeah. And, what she's talking about is the inland border checks. And I've talked about these many, many, many times. I update you all on what's going on there. And even on my Instagram, I do road updates sometimes, of, the conditions of the border checks. So, yeah.
Secure your pets.
Yep. Secure your pets. If you know what that means, you know what that means. But yeah, so that's one thing that, we deal with here in New Mexico is a lot. And I mean, a lot of inland border checks. So, like sitting here in Las Cruces, any cardinal direction I go, I run into a border check. Doesn't matter where. And that's unfortunate because, like, I thought this is America. Why am I getting stopped and questioned? I've never liked the border checks for that reason. Like, why am I haven't even left my county, let alone the state. Why am I being questioned?
And it's medical, and I'm a medical patient, and why are you harassing me? And exactly.
Like, I've been searched. I had my car searched during the medical days and stuff like that, and they were fucking assholes. Like for no reason. I was like, dude, I'm not your enemy, bro. Like, what the hell? Like, I'm a taxpayer. Just I'm trying to go to White Sands.
Well,
You
with
know?
that being said, I really try hard not to travel through red states for that reason.
And I don't blame you. You know, like, oh man, going through Texas, you know, just even El Paso, I'm just like, oh, it sucks. I
I'll
hate it.
travel through Texas before Kansas. Hashtag fuck Kansas.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Kansas either. Oh man, I got a buddy that lives there, and I went for his wedding, and no, it's like the Twilight Zone. You like drive past a farm, and it's the same setup. It's a farm, a little store, a silo, and then like a house. And then you go like 10 miles, and you see the same thing. And then like 50 miles, you see the same thing. You're like, am I going in circles? It's like the weirdest thing ever.
You want another fun Amy story?
uh,
I've been inside Kiowa County's jail.
How'd you do that?
During COVID, went to pick up my oldest son in St. Joe, Missouri, and went through Kansas because GPS said it'd be shorter, and got caught speeding. And before he even could say anything, pulled me out of the car and said, "Ma'am, your car smells like marijuana. You'll be going to jail today."
Holy shit. Wow. What happened from that?
Well, and I had my 17-year-old with me. We were going to pick up my 19-year-old, and he called his buddy. His buddy's like, "Yeah, come on over. I don't need any assistance, but you can join me." Basically just to harass me. So I spent 3 hours in intake, and the guy's in there. I was like, "I'm a medical patient. My car's in the system to transport cannabis," because I was
Yeah.
transporting cannabis for Organica to the store.
Yeah.
And they're like, "We don't care. We're a red state. We don't recognize any of that. Makes no difference here."
Yeah.
And took two of my last Bentley pipes that were clean.
Oh
The stories
no.
behind that. And then
Yeah.
I had some candy and some jerky in the door that wasn't marked.
Yeah.
And he asked me, "What are these?" And I said, "Candy." "What is this?" I said, "Jerky." And he put them back in the door, didn't confiscate them. Yeah. And then proceeded to tell my son that he could follow us in my car to the courthouse. And then he sped on the way there. I had the dog behind me the whole time in the car. They get me to intake, and my son has to go sit like inside with like this desk clerk or something like that while I try to figure out bail and bond. And then the guy inside realized I was a medical patient, and I was just on the verge of a major panic attack. They were really nice to me inside, but after 15 grand and a really good attorney in Kansas, I never went back to Kansas. I did have to take an 8-hour uh, alcohol and drug awareness class with a bunch of idiots online because it was COVID, but at least I could do it from home.
Yeah.
And during those 8 hours, I pretty much schooled everybody about cannabis. So there was that. And then after a psychological evaluation about my cannabis use, they expunged my record. So
Oh wow. Well, I'm glad that happened because that's some bullshit.
yeah, I know. Like I said, I had a really good attorney in Kansas. So amen for that. And right after I got bailed out by some amazing friends via telephone, um, they also gave me information on a location to go where somebody would set me up with some paraphernalia to get me home and dab my face off before I continued my trip.
And like that shit blows my mind. I'm like, you guys act like it makes it go away. Like it's there. Like it's gonna be there regardless if it's legal or not. Like it's ridiculous.
Well, and after the trauma you just caused me, I'm going to find a friend that's not that far away because I'm
Fuck
a
yeah. I know, right? It's like, so I'm gonna make him some money, you assholes.
They're there. You guys just don't know.
Right.
So,
But yeah, and hopefully in the future we won't have to worry about stupid shit like that.
I
Like
know.
just even traveling through another state, like
Yeah.
it shouldn't be like, yeah, I'm just traveling through your state and I have weed. Like I'm not stopping here and staying here. Like leave me alone. And like it's a little ridiculous. So but yeah, I hope something happens from this bill. It was just introduced, so it has a long way. I don't even know what committees it has. I don't even know the bill number, to be honest. But it's a fresh bill. We'll see what happens. California is doing something similar, so they could have took that idea from them, or this just could be like a kind of a trend thing that's going on with like laws and stuff. So we'll see what happens. But I'm excited to see what happens. I do hope this passes, because we do need to prepare ourselves for just what's gonna happen eventually. I don't know when, but once legalization finally happens, or decriminalization, because
how can they not do something about it? They're losing so much money. They can't tax it if they don't legalize it.
yeah, exactly. And taxing the retails is only going to last for so long.
And there's no point in descheduling it, or just deschedule it completely. There's no point in rescheduling it. It should be just as accessible as alcohol. I should be able to go to a consumption area where there's families and there are people having their family events, and kids should be growing up knowing that it's medicine and not that, it's the gateway to crack right around the corner.
Yeah, and kids don't care. They're too busy playing.
They don't. They don't care. You're gonna go ask your kid to get you a beer out of the fridge, but you're gonna try and act like I can't smoke a joint in front of my son.
Yeah, like it gets a little hypocrisy at that.
And it's
at that
even
point,
worse for small mom and pop shops who have kids who raise their children in this industry. I know the owners of Fire Flower, and their children helped them grow their plants to open their store. And then they decided that when rec passed, you couldn't have any kids on the property. So now their kids can't help them grow that, but their youngest son's goal right now, and he's already winning awards for his botany. He is learning to grow plants because his goal is to have award-winning cannabis.
Yeah. See, and we stifle stuff like that when we don't allow it, because these kids aren't smoking it. They're learning the process. If you want generational farmers, that's how you get generational farmers, is you allow the farmer to teach their child. Just like the guy who brews beer. I know many people that brew beer, and they show their kids. They have their kids running around. My brother brews cider. And the boys are there all the time. Like we're sitting there smashing apples, and they're in the back just running around, no big deal. So like it shouldn't be that big of a deal. It's a plant.
That's exactly right.
It's probably safer for the kids to be around. We're not using a lot of mechanical machinery like like
not
a
only
freaking
that,
grinder.
but if you're a patient, you're not putting any pesticides, you're not putting anything on that plant but love and care and attention.
Yeah, especially when you're a smaller license and you're not growing the tens of millions of thousands of plants. Like you're able to touch those plants and really give them the care that they need. And why would we stifle that? So
exactly.
But yeah, I digress, and yeah, I hope something good comes from it. But we have one more topic, and I want to move over to that. But do you have anything else before we move on?
I don't think so.
Let's go. We're gonna do this last thing, y'all. I'm done for the day. Well, done for the week, because this is the second episode for this week. So let's talk about this last thing. And Amy, you and I know about this last one very well, because this is something that we haven't always done: cannabis and testing. And I've talked about this a few times, and yesterday actually I wrote an article on my website, invaderkushnm.com. One of the publishings there, and I was talking about testing, especially here in New Mexico. But I did touch on other states too, and testing is an issue nationally. This isn't just to New Mexico, to California, to Colorado, or whatever. It's every single state, because no one has figured out how to test things correctly. Just like I've said, no one's regulated cannabis correctly yet. We're still figuring out this testing thing, and to be honest, we're still learning about the cannabis plant. I've said this a few times throughout the past couple months. We just found a new cannabis compound a couple months ago. And so now we got to figure out how to test for it. If we want to test for it or whatever. So that's one of the things that we have to keep in mind, is we're going to learn things about it all the time now. And, we haven't been able to really study it like we probably should. And that's one of the problems about cannabis, is like we haven't been able to study it because of its scheduling. Since it's Schedule 1, it makes it like almost damn near impossible to research it, which makes no sense. You should be able to research any drug or any substance, because the more we know about it, the better. Because like you have fentanyl over there, and it's what schedule is that? A Schedule 2? Yeah, it is a Schedule 2, because you can get it prescribed from a pharmacy. I can go to Walgreens and pick up fentanyl, but I can't get my medical cannabis, at a pharmacy like that. So
Yep.
we have those things. But when it comes to testing and everything, here in New Mexico, we actually haven't been doing it that long. I know like now it's the standard. Everybody has to get it tested. Even here in Cruces, we have like 2 facilities now, and Sunland Park has one too. So now the South has more. But back in the medical cannabis days, when me and Amy were running around trying to figure things out, there wasn't really much testing. And here in the South, they weren't required to test because of the Border Patrol inland checks. And the fact that we didn't really have a testing facility until like 2017, 2018 here in Las Cruces. So our cannabis was never tested down here. And we ran into a lot of issues, mold, mildew, pesticide stuff, blah, blah, blah. What is your remembrance of, all of this crazy stuff that, with before testing? Because it's only been around in New Mexico since like 2016 or so.
Yeah. I don't recall any major issues right off the bat, but I know that it's labs have circled back and circled through, and they've had issues. It's really hard to set a standard because there isn't across the board. I
Yeah.
mean, some will test for terpenes, some won't test for terpenes. It's another fee. I mean,
Mhm.
and they add up. Testing's
Yeah,
expensive.
it is.
So it's hard
And
for the small ones, and the big ones have to make it into their budget because they've got
mhm.
so many more. Testing's a big deal. I mean, I do a lot of that in the position that I do, as far as when we finish a product and it goes up for tests and it gets tied in the system. And I'm a stickler in our company for making sure that there's a COA attached to everything that's come in, because people want COAs, but
Yeah.
then it's, paper upon paper and this, that, or the other. But I just try really hard to make sure that when somebody touches something in our company, they know what it is.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
it's
and that's what we all should be able to do, is know what exactly we are putting in our bodies. It's just unfortunate that doesn't always happen. And within talking about this, the article that I wrote, pretty much just went down with the issues. And looking up the story for this today, I ran into an article that just came out, and I guess there was a couple in Oklahoma who decided to test like 200 samplers or something like that in the market, and I guess like 1 in 4, 1 in 5 was contaminated. Yeah. Then they found out that the THC levels were off, and they were, hardly ever, with any decent range of accuracy of what was reported. And it just got worse from there. It was just snowballing. And then, then you look, and there was a report from Oregon on top of that found out that they have a lot of issues with over-reporting THC numbers. And I think Colorado just cracked down on that recently. And as soon as they did that, the numbers plummeted. Like
yeah,
stuff that was like 30% dropped down to like 22, 21%, like overnight. And I think that's what's going to happen even here in New Mexico. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, every facility here is doing something bad or something, but I mean, we just dealt with that blue bonnet BS last year.
that's exactly right.
Yeah,
Well, and
the blue.
if you think back to it, when Organica first got in a rise, they had the highest test in New Mexico for a
I remember.
THC percentage because it
Hmm.
broke 30. I think it was like 32 or something like that.
I think it was 32. I remember Tim telling me.
And it's just, and then recently, not that long ago, I had read a report that said anything over 30 is just fabricated. I'm like, I don't know. And it's hard to
Yeah,
tell because, all those plants were once upon a time grown to not have THC in them. And then
yeah,
they've been shifted back to have potency to them. And they're, I don't know. It's hard to say.
yeah. And
I don't
the
know
methods
how
that a lot of these.
I don't
Huh?
know how accurate tests are. I just don't.
Exactly. And a lot of the places, even here in New Mexico, they use different methods, different equipment, different technology. And like you said, not all of them test beyond what's required. Because in the state, they just required, I think, THC, CBD, and CBN, and of course the pesticides. The terpenes aren't mandatory or anything else. So, like Rio Grande Analytics, they give you the terpenes and a bunch of other cool stuff, which is great. You get more information, but it's not required. but the consumer is starting to want like terpenes, like what's the percentage of terpenes in there? How much CBG does it have? Like I'm looking for that, or, like
Well, and
THCV.
it all depends on the product too, because
Mhm.
distillate's not going to have any terpenes in it.
Yeah, exactly. And
But
that should be on the label. Like
the
there's no terpenes because
normal consumer doesn't understand that.
yeah, yeah,
But, when you distill a process in order to put it back into something, if it's not an edible, you're just putting it in the edible for the THC content. But if you're
yeah,
making a cart or a disposable or something like that, then you're reterping it. And it's a matter of what you're reterping it with as to where those cannabinoids come from.
mhm.
Because if you're not using natural terpenes, then you're getting the synthetic ones and you don't get the same effects.
Yeah. And to be honest, tests don't even tell you that either. Is it synthetic terpenes? Is it natural? I kind of feel that should be on the label. If
Yeah.
someone's using synthetic terpenes, I feel like it should be stated that, this is non-natural terpenes that are added in because it's fair. Like when I get a
It,
product, go ahead.
it is fair. It's fair
Yeah.
for the consumer to know that.
Mhm.
And I think as patients, we understand that if it's a little fruitier and it's got more flavor to it, that's probably not a natural terpene.
Right. If this tastes like a bowl of fruity pebbles, like you just ate a spoonful, it might not be real. Because like the other day I was smoking, someone had me try a pen, and I was like, and they're like, "What? You don't like it?" I was like, "I'm mad because it tastes good, and I know because it tastes this good that it's not fucking real." They're like,
That's right.
"Oh,
That's exactly my response to almost every terpene. I mean, every pen or all in one that I hit. I'm just like,
yeah,
because I'm not a vape person so much. If I'm
I
gonna
mean,
vape,
either."
it's gonna be a dab.
Mhm.
I don't really care for they're convenient. They're great for certain situations, and by all means, I'll have them for that. But they're not my go-to.
Yeah,
If they taste good, then that's not, the point.
yeah,
And
exactly,
there's
and,
so
and it,
many different ways to make them that I don't think there's enough room on the label for the consumer to have that information.
yeah, put a QR code on there, but yeah, exactly. Like, and sometimes they're so small. Like, we make hash rosin, so the boxes they're not that
Oh
big.
yeah,
So most of our information is on a QR code.
yeah,
Because it's hard to put everything on there that they want, as well as like smaller information. But the important information still needs to be there, and it needs to be accurate. And that's
absolutely.
why we need to make sure that testing is going to be something that we can rely on. Because right now we've just been lying to people saying, oh, when we legalize it, it's going to be tested and safe. It's going to be tested and safe. And now we're telling people we don't know.
Yeah,
And that's not fair to the consumer either, for many reasons. If I'm buying something that says 30%, I hope it says it's 30%. But, more than likely it's not, because another issue is we allow people to be the ones that select their samples. And of course, they're going to cherry sample the best sample that they have. And of course, that's going to test the best. But the all around plant isn't going to be the 30% because once you go lower, the lower nodes, they're definitely not going to be 30%. So we need to figure out how are we going to collect these samples the correct way first, because if we don't collect them right the first to start out with, we're not going to get the right results.
Well,
Um,
and then does that create another venue for a whole other company that does nothing but sampling? Because RLD doesn't have the people to go around according to their rules and pick samples from every product. And if you're doing the same thing with edibles, how are you doing that? And then how's
yeah,
that going to set back the producers if they make edibles and 100 items per batch, and they're waiting on that 100 items to get out, and now we're
yeah.
waiting at testing.
And edibles and stuff, that makes sense, because like it's a little bit harder to say I'm just going to grab this one gummy that looks the best and maybe it'll test the best. When you make a batch like that, it's a little different. When you're growing a plant, is essentially what I mean is when you have the whole plant, you want to know the overall content in it, not just one branch. Is kind of what I'm
Exactly.
saying.
Exactly.
Yeah, and either it be us, we push for that, or the consumer ousts people that don't do that, or a company does it. I've been a firm believer that the growing side of our cannabis industry needs to be the Department of Ag. The RLD and CCD has
Absolutely.
no
Absolutely.
business regulating plants when they have no clue what the fuck, anything
None.
about plants.
None.
And I feel we would probably be in a better place if Department of Ag ran the production side of our industry. And I get it, they did it for ease, but at the end of the day, they're just not qualified to regulate plants the way that they are. Because I've New Mexico State is the one that has Department of Ag, and I talk to those guys a lot. And, like we're just like back and forth, like what the fuck. So
Exactly.
it's like this could have been done way better, or they already have a system in place for another industry that they would just copy and paste to the cannabis industry, or cater to it. They're like, oh yeah, we already do that with this whatever crop. I don't know why the state doesn't do this. And I'm like, well, why the fuck don't you guys just do it?
Right.
Makes more sense.
Exactly. Yeah. But
so in the future, I kind of feel that we need to push the legislature to hand over production to Department of Ag as a first step in fixing this testing issues that we're running into, even here in New Mexico. And maybe other states will follow suit, because now we're starting to see more consumption lounges, if you haven't noticed. Not
like
just because of us, but other states. Yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
I'm loving that. Probably gonna go to one while I'm in Albuquerque, so I'll hit you up. Maybe we'll hang out and smoke some doobies.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, hopefully the testing thing will get better, because like I said, it's not just here. That couple in Oklahoma, the thing in Oregon, and who knows what else is going to come out in the following days. Because I just wrote that article yesterday, and then this morning I wake up to more information about it. So I'm like, oh god, this ain't getting any better.
I think I just read an article or cruised past an article about testing in New York recently, and I don't remember. I like I said, I didn't stop and read it, but it said something about guidelines are established for some testing. I don't know. I hear New York's going crazy right now. So
they are, and what's funny is our bill and their bill are similar. They were written by the same group. The Drug Policy Alliance of New York and New Mexico work together on both bills. And that's the funny part, is ours veered away at a certain point, and look how much better it's running, versus theirs that just decided to be this weird, strict thing.
Oklahoma, Wild West.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, we have our own issues, but it wasn't that.
No.
We didn't have dudes and little white tables in front of like a comic book store selling weed.
Well, it depends on where you're looking.
I guess so, yeah, but it wasn't like widespread like New York. Yeah, they had like dudes like in front of bodegas just posted up with a plastic table just selling weed,
like Girl Scout cookies.
Like Girl Scout cookies. Yeah,
like
it
Girl
was.
Scout cookies. And then they get mad at the
wild.
Girl Scout cookies for setting up next door.
That's true. They did that.
Yeah, I remember that. That is funny.
Girls trying to make a hustle.
Right. Trying to make my money, god damn it. We're all trying in some way, but at least we can do it the honest way with some real testing and stuff like that. So hopefully New York figures their shit out, and we figure ours out too. We're not we're not angels either. Like I said earlier, we had that blue bonnet issue last year where they didn't even have any equipment in their building, and they were sending product to Texas to test, which
that kind of goes back to making sure that they do their on-site inspections when they do licensing, and making sure that things are on the up and up, because you can't just give them a license and then be like, oh, sorry, we didn't mean to give that to you, we just forgot to look.
Yeah, it's like, what do you mean you forgot to do your job?
Sorry. Remember when it was medical, you they were out there a dozen times before you could even like try and put a lock on the door and say you were a dispensary.
Yeah, they were on it, and now it's just low-hanging fruit. Who's the easiest?
Ice cream trucks and working out of our garage. So
right. So, but anyway, Amy, thank you so much for joining me today. That's all I have on the conversations today and all of these. I hope something changes on that testing front. We'll see. But I really appreciate you joining me today. It was such a pleasure talking to you again. Hopefully I get to see you this weekend or sometime soon. I always love running into you at events too. And sometimes when I go to an event, I'm like, I know I'm going to run into Amy. I'm not even going to hit her up. I'm just going to see her there, and I know it. And I always do. So I always love running into
you. And thanks so much for what you continue to do for us in the industry. It's nice to have somebody that I can pick up the phone and know that I'm going to get good information. And best information that you can find. Otherwise, it's just, sometimes I question the validity of it. That's for sure.
Well, I appreciate it. And, I try to be as accurate as possible and, get the best information I can. I mean, government spent a lot of money teaching me how to collect information, so I might as well use it right. So thank you
for
again.
having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Of course. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me this week. You guys got a special 2 episodes this week, so none next week. I'm just kidding. We'll be back next week for our regular schedule with our show and everything. We'll see what happens with this Texas stuff, with this testing stuff. I might be back next week with a similar story, but something worse, or maybe something better. I always hope it's something better. But that's not the way everything always goes. So I'll see you guys next week, and make sure to like, subscribe, follow, whatever you got to do to stay in the know. All right, shoots. I think we lost you for a second, Amy. You there? Uh-oh, we lost her.
Oh, we were doing so well.
We're almost done. Oh no, I think she's coming back.
She should.
There we go.
We're back.
Shit happens. Oh, no worries, it happens. I know Gino hates doing edits, but at least it's towards the end of the episode.
That's funny. Sorry.
You killed Kenny.
I know, right?